The college football regular season has come and it has gone. The regular season is over, and after 12 games, 12 hard-fought games, the Texas Longhorns finished the season 9-3, likely to miss the college football playoff, but they do finish 6-1 in their last 7 games. We will talk about the win over number 3 Texas A&M on Black Friday. We will talk about Thanksgiving. We will talk about my experience at the game and pick up all the pieces of this regular season. What does it ultimately mean that the Texas Longhorns finish 9-3 this season? And what does that mean for the postseason exactly? And then as we enter the month of December, here on Monday, December 1st, the year of our Lord 2025, we are now less than 48 hours away from the early signing period, the main signing period these days in recruiting, opening on Wednesday, which means that the 2026 recruiting cycle is coming to its culmination. We're going to talk about some flips that have happened, some late action on the recruiting trail for the Longhorns, positive and negative, and we look ahead to 2027 as the Longhorns pick up a huge early commitment from a big-time 2027 commitment over the weekend, off the heels of that victory over Texas A&M. And then at the end, we might have time to talk a little bit about the coaching hires that have happened over the weekend. But we've got plenty of time in the offseason to do that as well. So if we don't get to that, that is A-okay. I welcome in my co-host today. We had some technical difficulties starting the stream. We've been away from this channel for 12 days for the Thanksgiving holiday. Things got busy, and all of a sudden things are different on Restream, where we record these podcasts. So for that reason, we are live tonight. I don't really mind it. Hopefully, you guys enjoy this. So you can find this episode under the live section of our YouTube channel. And don't forget, we do record twice a week here, usually, except around the holidays, I guess, or if there's any special circumstances. We record the Raw Prospect Football Podcast, where we talk a lot about the NFL side of things. So if you like college football but you love the NFL, maybe you go check that out as well. I welcome in my co-host for the first time back here in 12 days since the middle of November. I don't think we recorded Emmy since before the Arkansas game, if I'm not mistaken. So,
yeah,
how was your holiday? How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I had a couple days off to close last week, and it didn't feel long enough, honestly. Watched a ton of football on Saturday. Basically sat around the whole day just eating leftovers, and I mean it's you can't beat that. That's the perks of Thanksgiving weekend, I guess. There's a lot of football back to back to back to back. But yeah, man, we're here in the closing stages. It's conference championship week, and 6 of the 9 conference championship games are basically toss-ups.
Yes, indeed. And that brings us to what happened over the weekend. Starting on Friday with number 16 Texas, what they were ranked coming in by, I believe, the CFP and the AP poll. They beat number 3 Texas A&M to give A&M its first loss of the year, 27-17. Texas now moves up to number 14 in the AP poll. They needed some chaos to ensue on Saturday. That didn't quite happen enough for them to, I think, rise enough to get into the college football playoff come Sunday when the final rankings come out and the final announcement is made. But I'm interested to see ultimately where or how far Texas moves up in the penultimate rankings tomorrow night when the committee gives their, I guess, second to last set of rankings. Where Texas will move up, my guess is it will be similar to where the AP poll has them. They'll move up a couple spots. But the question then becomes, will they move up enough to give them the ultimate chance to make the final leap, or are there just too many teams ahead of them to make that big of a leap into the top 10, which is ultimately where they would need to be ranked to get at-large bid to the playoff. But a positive ending to the regular season, nevertheless. So, Emmy, I'll just give you the floor. We haven't recorded since before the Arkansas game, so there might be a lot to say, but your just overall thoughts on the close to this regular season. You can focus in on either game.
Yeah, man. I think a lot of positives there. Obviously, closing out the season without Anthony Hill in both games, you expected the defense to be, I guess, feeling that absence for sure. And I think in the Arkansas game, we definitely did. But they really bounced back against A&M. And I think, in all honesty, if you told Texas fans you went, 3-0 against A&M, Arkansas, and, in Oklahoma, but you missed the playoff, obviously you take getting in the playoff, but that's something Texas fans it's a big deal. It's not quite as big a deal as Ohio State playing Michigan or Michigan beating Ohio State. That rivalry is one of its own. But that three team quartet of team Texas players as a rivals, if you beat them every year, that does big stuff for recruiting, and it's already taking shape. But in terms of just on the field stuff, I mean, it's Arch Manning. The main takeaway is Arch Manning. Simple as that. I think I wonder where this momentum will take him going into the offseason. Obviously he's going to head into this offseason with a lot to work on, but I think there's also there's a lot of positives there with I think the flow of run and pass, I think as well from Sark's standpoint as a play caller, felt a lot more natural in that game. Obviously, there was a lot of third and longs, which I didn't like, but Arch's ability to play make and make it happen on those third and longs, it was really good to see.
Outside of Arch, obviously, I think if you have to pick one moment from this season, I think it might be that 35-yard touchdown run to put Texas back up 10 points, 27-17 on 3rd and 3. That might be his moment because that ultimately really closed the door on the Aggies.
Yeah.
They punched back. They went up. The Aggies scored a touchdown, I think, after that face mask penalty on Jelani McDonald on 3rd and long, 3rd and 21.
Yeah.
And they really kind of took back momentum, it felt like. Because I was in the stadium, and we'll get to that a little bit later. They really took back momentum. They cut it to 3, but the Longhorns put together a drive. And that run where he breaks loose into the end zone to put them back up 10, that might have been Arch Manning's moment of 2025. There might be a couple others you can put up there with it, but that felt to me like his signature moment in this big of a game against Texas A&M with the stakes that were there. But outside of Arch, who I'll obviously touch on more in a little bit, if you had to give 2 or 3 other game balls, who would those game balls go to?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple this game. Michael Taff, for one, the send-off interception to close out that game. I mean, what a moment, man. I mean, him celebrating the end zone, being able to take in the crowd in that moment, that must have been so cool for him, man. Coming in as a walk-on and then have that send-off moment as a senior. I mean, I think there's a chance he'll do big things in the NFL, but regardless of what happens, man, that dude is a Longhorn legend. It doesn't matter what happens from moving forward in his football career. And then Quintravion Wisner, man, my God, you can nitpick and be hey, he got 10 yards there, but if you had a back with more speed, it could have been 30 or whatever. But like, as much as you want to do that, at the end of the day, man, Quintravion Wisner, like he gets the job done, man. He just does. And the his ability, his vision, his patience, the footwork, this one cut ability, like that was the best I've seen him run since last year when he was fully healthy. So that was really good to see as well. Does he have one more year of eligibility, or is he done?
No, he can come back
Hmm.
if he wants to, and I think. Well, I'll touch on that in a little bit, but yes, he can come back. I don't know what this game in particular means for his draft stock, but I do agree with you because that was going to be my first game ball. Ultimately, I think Wisner is developing a legacy for himself that first and foremost starts with his performances against the rivals,
Yeah.
Oklahoma and Texas A&M. I'm now calling him the rival killer because that's what he's been the last 2 years for Texas since they joined the SEC. Another big rivalry game for him and another massive performance for him in a big time moment. He struggled against the Georgias of the world. He has not been good against the elite of the elite competition for the most part. But last year he had a huge game against Oklahoma. He had a huge game rushing for 186 in College Station, was a big time catalyst for Texas in dominating that game, even though they didn't score more than 17 points in that game. It was his ability to pick up first downs on the ground and maintain drives in that game that really allowed Texas to control that game despite maybe not dominating it as much as we thought they would on the scoreboard. 19 carries for 155 and a pair of catches for 19 more yards. Just absolutely massive second half. It was a massive performance for Texas. I think you have to give credit to Sark making some second half adjustments. I think he figured out how to punish this Aggies defense on the ground. I was at the game, and it looked like to me that the Aggies were bringing safeties down into the box a lot to try to shut down the Longhorns' run game and to force them into third and long situations so that their vaunted pass rush could try to get after Arch and take advantage of what has been an up and down offensive line all season long. We talk about Cassius Howell, who is has been one of the best edge rushers in America all season long. But ultimately, in the second half, the Aggies got caught multiple times on sweep and power schemes outside when they tried to run under blockers. And Trey Wisner was able to make the right cut, get outside, and create some explosive running plays. There were multiple explosive running plays in that second half to extend drives, to get Texas into Texas A&M territory that we have not seen all season long. And so I think you have to give Wisner credit for making the right cuts and getting the yards that were there, as he always pretty much does. But you also have to give Stark credit for changing up the scheme a little bit and attacking a little bit differently in the second half. Texas needed to run the ball to win this game like they did last year, because if they didn't, it was going to be very hard to win this game in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and long situations every single time. Like it felt like it was trending that way in the first half. But when you talk about Trey Wisner and how I so far will remember Trey Wisner's career at Texas, I will remember that in 4 games against the Sooners and the Aggies, he has 87 carries for 553 yards, 6.5 yards per carry, and an average of 138 yards per game in those 4 games against Texas's 2 biggest rivals.
Who
That's
have great
really,
defenses as well.
yeah.
That's the funny
Oklahoma,
thing.
Oklahoma even more so than Texas A&M. And so I think, I mean, you have to give a whole lot of credit to the kid. Wasn't a highly touted recruit, wasn't a 5-star recruit, wasn't even a 4-star. He was a lowly 3-star, but he's made a name for himself.
For sure.
And I think I don't really know what the outlook is. I kind of have an idea of what the outlook is for the 2026 running back room. And I'll give it to you real fast, and then we have to move on. I hate to say it, but we're getting close to transfer portal season. And there's a feel behind the scenes that CJ Baxter is probably on the way out. I'd love to have him back if he's healthy, but ultimately there's going to be some attrition. There has to be some attrition if Texas wants to do what it wants to do in the portal this offseason. My money right now would be on Trey Wisner ultimately being back next year for one more season and CJ Baxter being out, transferring somewhere else, likely closer to home, and I wish him the best. We know Jarrett Gibson's already entering the transfer portal when it opens. He's already no longer with the program. I think Christian Clark will be back. I think there are two guys who can pretty much almost guarantee that will be back in this backfield next year. If they want to be back, they will be back, and that's Christian Clark and Trey Wisner. Ricky Stort has already transferred out. He's no longer with the program anymore. He was part of last year's recruiting class. Things didn't work out there, but they still have James Simon. I think they'll have those three guys back for sure, unless something changes with Wisner. And then I think it's Derek Cooper, who they're bringing in this recruiting class. He's a big-time guy that could contribute early. And I think it's a portal guy. That's what I think the running back room is going to look like next year, in case you're wondering. And we have all offseason to talk about that. But
right.
That's
going to be an interesting conversation for sure.
Any further comments on Wisner in the run game before I get to my next couple points here?
Well, I do just want to think big picture here and say, like, if we go back to after the Florida game and we were like, is this offense going to turn it around? Like what is this actually going to look like? If you talked to us then and told us that we'd go 9-3 and 3-0 against Oklahoma, A&M, and also beating a really good Vanderbilt team as well, I think we would take that and run, even with missing the playoffs, because this was a mess after that Florida game, man. Like, the offense was really, really bad. Even after Kentucky, like, this was a relatively quick turnaround here.
Yeah, it was. A lot of credit has to be handed out all around. But if we just real quick before we get to the bigger picture stuff, talk a little bit more about this game in particular. I don't think you can like point to one Longhorn on this defense and say that was the star of the game on Saturday. You brought up Michael Taft, and that interception was so big. He made another big time play. He did it last year against A&M. And we're talking about a guy that had struggled uncharacteristically the past couple of weeks. Now, he wasn't the only guy in the Longhorn secondary that wasn't playing well, but he had a terrible half, probably his worst half as a Longhorn in that first half against Arkansas. And there's one play in particular that everybody has been pointing to, where he got run over by the running back in the first half and blah, 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 blah. But he got it together in that second half, and he played, I think, one of his best games of this season on Saturday, even more so than a guy like Jelani McDonald. But there were so many, like in the absence of Anthony Hill, I've been up and down on a guy like Leona Lafau throughout this season. But if you were to point to one, like the most important player that had to play well on Saturday in order for Texas to win, outside of Colin Simmons, if you had to point to one guy outside of Colin Simmons and Malik Muhammad, obviously with the task that he was, tasked with guarding KC Concepcion, it probably would have been Leona Lafau, given that not only was Anthony Hill going to miss the game, but Ty Anthony Smith missed the first half of this game because of a targeting call in the second half of last week's game. He stepped up, though, 11 tackles. They were really in need of that. He played a very solid game. Nothing that's going to blow you away, but he played a very solid game. He made some good open field tackles. Ethan Burke, man, 2 years in a row against Texas A&M, really showed up. He had a blocked field goal, 9 tackles, and a pass breakup. He really stepped up. I saw a couple pressures generated by Justice Terry. Didn't quite get home for the sack, but he was disruptive at times. And then I thought Ty Anthony Smith came back in the second half and played a good game. And then Kobe Black with the final interception, I thought also played well. Yeah. So there were. It felt like there were so many other Longhorns that stepped up in this game in the absence of your second best player on your defense in Anthony Hill. And maybe some weeks your best player on your defense and Anthony Hill. And overall, I thought the Texas defense, throughout a game, you're never going to be perfect. There were some blown assignments, right? There were some things that could have been cleaned up, some missed tackles. But I thought this was probably the best Texas defensive, the most complete Texas defensive performance since when? When was the last, maybe the first 3 quarters of the Vanderbilt game? Would that be it, I guess?
Maybe so, yeah.
Or maybe the Kentucky game, but that's not that's not
maybe the second half against Mississippi State, but can't really count that either.
I don't know. I thought against a real team with a real pulse, it was maybe their most complete defensive performance.
Maybe the Oklahoma game. That's one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
But
definitely.
Probably
since then. You're probably right about that. Probably since Red River. But this offense is like this offense that A&M had coming into this game is, I think, in a different league than the Oklahoma offense that we've been watching.
Right.
To be fair. So anything else? Like overall, this is a massive win on a lot of fronts for the Longhorns, even if they're not going to get into the college football playoff. One more shout out I'd like to give. Jack Injuries, I think, had his best game of his Texas career to this point.
Yeah, this is what we've been waiting on.
Yep. Hadn't really seen a lot of run after catch, a lot of explosive plays generated by that position this season. But he had a couple of huge catches and a couple of huge run after catch plays that I've been waiting to see from him, and we saw that on Saturday. So credit to him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But is that it?
I'm already tired of the is Texas deserving of a college football playoff debate, or are they not deserving of a college football playoff debate? I'm just going to say this, and then I want to hear your final thoughts on it, and then we can move on. Ultimately, 2 things can be true. Confirmation bias is a hell of a drug. Because here's what Texas fans will tell you. The Texas fans on social media will tell you, we have a set of wins that no other team can match. We've beaten 3 top 15 teams this season. 3 of the top 13 teams ranked right now, Texas has beaten, and they've beaten pretty thoroughly. Now, the Vanderbilt game ends up being a 3-point win, but you're lying to yourself if you didn't watch all of that game. The Longhorns dominated until like the last 8 minutes of that game. Now, should that 8 minutes ever have happened? No.
No.
Should it have ever gotten that close? No. But you have to at least acknowledge, like, Texas dominated the majority of that game, which allowed them that much leeway late. And then they beat a top 8 Oklahoma team. Now, I don't think they're really a top 8 team in America, but that's beside the point. They beat a college football playoff bound Oklahoma team by 3 scores, and they beat an undefeated Texas A&M team by double digits. So the confirmation bias in the Longhorn fans will tell you we've beaten this set of teams that were all ranked top 10 when we beat them. 2 of them still ranked in the top 10. One of them probably deserving to go to the college football playoff, but might ultimately get left out. And the only reason we're not likely going to make it is because we scheduled Ohio State. And if we had scheduled a team like Akron or another game like that, we'd be 10-2 and we'd be in because we're Texas. But funny enough, the A&M and the Oklahoma fans will tell you, no, I get it. You beat us and you have some great wins, but you don't deserve to be in because you lost to dog shit Florida. Touche. I'm tired of hearing the arguments. I ultimately, personally, I said it before the season, and I'll say it again now. Coming in, if you think back to our preview episode, I think it was our in-person episode. There were 3 games on this schedule. The 3 biggest games on this schedule coming into the season were all road games. You know what they were? They were at Ohio State, they were at Florida, and they were at Georgia. And what did we say? We said Texas has to win at least one of those. And ultimately, they didn't. I don't think Texas is – I think they proved that on any given Saturday, they're a college football playoff caliber team. They can beat these teams that are going to make the playoff. But they weren't consistent enough Saturday to Saturday to, I think, warrant being it. That's my opinion on it. I do think their wins, like their resume, you can stack their set of wins against pretty much anybody, and they can go toe-to-toe. And you have to at least consider it more than I ever thought you would have needed to consider it, maybe like a month ago. But I'm just tired of hearing the arguments. I want this to be over. I want to move on. Even though it's disappointing, I want to move on. I want to move on to the offseason and portal and all that kind of stuff. What is your take on it, though?
Yeah, ultimately, it's exactly what you said about the 3 road games. We picked those out before the season. Like, Texas has to win at least one of them. They didn't win any of them. And also, I think it's a bit similar to the situation Ole Miss had last year with them losing at Florida as well, and that ultimately being the reason they missed the playoff. That one was a little bit different, given that was to close the season and they needed to win that game to ensure they got in. But it's a similar thing where that loss is ultimately like a inexplicable loss like that is ultimately what's going to do you in. Because I think if Texas lost by a point, like, okay, like, and they were competitive the entire game, like, okay, like you could forgive that maybe if you're the committee. But the fact that they got stomped in that first half, the way they did, that part is what's a little bit unforgivable. And if you're going to make a case for Texas, you point straight to that. And you say, hey, like, you got stomped by Florida. Like, that's a no-no.
Do you think it's any different if the Georgia game, instead of being beaten by 25, what if that's a 3-point game? Do you think this is any different, even with the loss to Florida? Yes or no?
I ultimately think if Texas finished with 3 losses, regardless of how that Georgia game was, regardless of that score, I think the committee would ultimately, if everything else finished the way it did, I think the committee would ultimately lean towards Miami and possibly Vanderbilt.
Okay. I was just
But
asking the question.
but yeah, I think yes, it would be different. I think they would have had more of a shot to get in, but with everything else remaining the way it has, I struggle to see them getting in as a 3-loss team, regardless.
The bottom line here is, I think should have never lost to Florida, and there were things that could have been done in the offseason. We've said this almost every single week. Things that could have been done in the offseason to help prevent that loss. I think Texas is in this position because of some of the decisions that ultimately were not made or were made, whichever way you want to look at it, in the offseason. And hopefully those mistakes don't
Repeat themselves.
reoccur. Yeah, reoccur this offseason. I don't think they will. Because I think if you look at what Texas has done on the recruiting trail this year, this is the point I'll make in a minute once we get to the recruiting stuff. They've changed their approach a little bit on the recruiting trail, which I think is going to open up more leeway that they're going to have in the portal. But ultimately, look, for preseason expectations, this ultimately will go down as a historical, like this season will go down as a footnote, kind of as a failure more so than anything else, based on the preseason expectations that were put on this team. But it's a lot different than what we thought this was going to be after the Kentucky game. I'm at fault for it. I think a lot of Texas fans in message board culture are at fault for it. Hand up.
Me too. Yeah.
We said, what did we say? I said in particular, this is an average team. And clearly, they're a little bit more than an average team because they win 6 out of the last 7 games and they end up 9-3 when I thought the ceiling for this team might be 8-4, 7-5. So I guess you can say what you can say for Texas is it's a disappointment, but there's all of a sudden more momentum and more positives to take away from the end of this season than maybe we ever would have thought a month and a half ago.
Right. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
that will do it for that conversation. But ultimately, you love the feeling of beating all 3 rivals. There's only 5 quarterbacks in Texas history to beat Arkansas, Oklahoma, and A&M all in the same season. I can't name all 5, but I know 2 of them. One was Quinn Ewers last year, and the other is now Arch Manning. So that's pretty cool. But with that, and I think Colt did it as well, if I'm not mistaken. It was either Colt or Vince did it. I'll have to look that up. But with that, we move on. Early signing day. Let's talk some recruiting. Early signing day is on Wednesday. The early signing period, I think, runs through Friday. The 2026 cycle is coming to a close, and the 2027 cycle is picking up steam. Emmy, do you have a certain place in mind that you would like to start with this? Or do you want me to kick us off?
I think we start with Jamarion, Carlton, and then Easton Royal. Those are the guys that we've touched on before on the show, and then we close the show with the 3 new guys that we haven't touched on before. So to start off, Jamarion Carlton flipping from Baylor. This one came down to the wire because the reporting on it, from what I had saw, was that with Dave Aranda staying, there was, there was a general feeling in Waco that, hey, like this guy's going to stick with us. But Carlton had visited Austin twice at that point later on, and then from there, I think Texas was able to make that headway and just get that flip all the way through. So credit to the Texas coaching staff. This is a pretty big deal. He's a 4-star. He's freakish, man. Like he's a really good athlete. He's gonna be a guy that you can develop into a um, what's a good comparison? I don't know if Baron Sorrell would be a perfect comparison. He doesn't have this like the size of Baron Sorrell. Um, maybe more of like a Ethan Burke type.
Yeah. I'm through the roof excited about Texas flipping Carlton. He was one of my favorite in-state targets in this class out of Temple. I might rank him in my top 5 in this class, in the in-state class. Now, there were a couple reasons I didn't think a month ago that Texas was going to get Carlton. I won't get into all of them, but a couple of them. Number one, Texas had their dude at edge or at defensive end in Richie Wesley. Number two, I thought the kid was pretty solid with Baylor at that point, given that when he committed back in early July, they had the much better NIL offer on the table. And he hadn't really taken any visits to Texas before the visit that he made for the Vanderbilt game, before the bye week, before Georgia. He hadn't taken any visits. He was solid with Baylor, and they had the better NIL offer on the table. So I was keeping my eye on Carlton just because Texas usually flips some big targets late, and they really wanted Carlton. They just hadn't made their NIL push with him yet at that point because they just got Richie Wesley. Kind of out of the blue, too, because Richie Wesley, who's, I think, a slightly better prospect than Carlton, although I would rank Carlton as a clear super blue chip. I think he's a clear top 100 kid. He's a consensus top 100 borderline super blue chip kind of kid in the industry. But I would rank him as like a clear consensus super blue chip. I think the kid's absolutely fantastic. You can't find me 10 high school football players in the state of Texas that are better than Jamarion Carlton. But ultimately a huge flip. They wanted another defensive lineman, defensive end to go along with Richie Wesley and the big guy inside, James Johnson, in this class. I think he's a super blue chip kind of guy. And the big thing here is I don't think, in fact, I know that Texas didn't have to go over the top from a financial standpoint to flip him. From the start of this recruiting process, dating back to like January, which is when we really started to talk about 2026 kids, I thought it was Texas until it's not with Carlton. And even when he committed to Baylor early, I still had deep down a lot of confidence that Texas would make this push and ultimately win out in the end. And ultimately what this came down to is he hadn't taken any visits. If he was going to flip somewhere, it was going to be Texas because the final two in his recruitment were Baylor and Texas. Baylor makes the announcement that they're keeping Dave Aranda around for one more season. But the kid just kept showing up to Texas games. He showed up to the Vanderbilt game. He showed up again at the Arkansas game. And he showed up at the Texas A&M game. And once he showed up at the Texas A&M game, it was over for Baylor. That was the sign that, okay, Texas has got this kid, on the hook. and they flip him. He actually boosts. Here's how you know how big of a flip this is. He boosts them in the rankings by 3 spots. They were number 10 in the Rivals recruiting rankings coming in to the weekend. Now they're number 7 just with this flip alone. So big time flip, big time player, potentially an early impact guy, and a guy that I think can put on some weight and potentially end up kind of like Lance Jackson moving inside. I think he'll start out as a 5 tech, but I think he's got the potential to move inside later in his career and play some 3 tech as well. So some versatility with this kid, and I think he'll be able to like keep his athleticism with his big long frame that we see on tape here with putting on that weight. I think Texas will have a good plan for him. Big time flip, Jamarion Carlton. He will sign on Wednesday. He's already announced that. So big time for Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to hear a little bit more, I guess more of a deep dive into us breaking down his tape, go watch Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports from a couple episodes ago. That's where we do that. I think it was about 30 or 40 minutes in, just like in this one. So go check that out if you're interested in that. But with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the second commitment Texas got over the weekend. Second of 5. This one in the 2027 class. This is a guy we've already talked about before as well. Easton Royal, 5-star, number 1 overall wide receiver in the 2027 class.
Yeah. The Longhorns picked up a commitment. Their first commitment, by the way, of 2027. From New Orleans, Brother Martin wide receiver Easton Royal. He committed to Texas on Saturday morning in the aftermath of being at the Texas A&M game on Friday night. This is a big time kid. He's the best player. He's rated as the best player in the state of Louisiana by the industry. He's got the number 1 wide receiver in the country by the industry, and his industry ranking is number 7 nationally. He's a top 10 player nationally. This is high praise, but I think it's earned for Easton Royal. He is Xavier Worthy 2.0. This is a kid that 5'11", 185 pounds, and he brings the same kind of playmaking speed traits that Worthy brought to the table when he arrived on campus in 2021. A 10'3", 100-meter guy as a junior in high school. The tape speaks for itself. You can't keep this kid from taking the top off the defense when he opens up and gets a step on any of these defensive backs that he's playing against in high school. And he plays in one of the toughest districts in the state of Louisiana and in the entire country. Good luck running stride for stride with Easton Royal. I ultimately put him in. I don't think he's quite the player that DeCorian Moore was coming out of his junior year of high school, but he's in that zip code. Like, he's in the DeCorian Moore zip code. Best receiver in his class, number 1, player in his state. And that 10-3 speed is just something you cannot teach. It's something Xavier Worthy had. This really excites me because of that. Like, speed, you can't keep it off the sidelines. And if he makes it to campus, and we've got a long way to go, ladies and gentlemen, until signing day 2027 next December, like, Texas is going to have to keep this kid committed. That's going to be a challenge, especially with Lane Kiffin now being at LSU. But it's better to have his commitment than to not have his commitment from a guy like this. And ultimately, I'll be honest, Texas doesn't like taking a lot of early commitments under Sark, especially not this early. Like, this is a commitment before they've even signed the class before Easton Royal. And so when this commitment happened on Saturday, I was like, okay, that's interesting. Because Sark doesn't like taking a lot of early commitments. He usually likes to wait and then strike late. That's been his MO at Texas. So my first thought was, well, could he reclassify? Could he be on his way to the 2026 class? That's ultimately not going to happen, barring a change of plans. But it was a question that was asked by Texas fans when he committed because it was just weird timing. But, I mean, he's a speed demon. He's become one of the best players in the 2027 recruiting class. He needs a little bit more polishing before I think he reaches his optimal level as a player. But he's got superstar upside. There's no question about that in my mind.
For sure.
It's pretty simple. He's one of the best players in the entire 2027 recruiting class. He's arguably the best at his position. And he brings a skill set at wide receiver that I think right now, this program, what they had this year, desperately lacks. And that's the game-changing speed that they've had the last couple of years with Xavier Worthy and Matthew Golden and Adonai Mitchell and Isaiah Bond and those kinds of guys. This guy has that kind of track speed. 10-3 in the 100 meter as a junior. He's still relative to his when he'll ultimately end up on campus. He's still a baby in high school. He's still got room to grow, another full year to grow as a player. So it's really exciting to get a commitment like this to potentially jumpstart momentum for 2027. But also, what you have to keep in, you have to temper your excitement just a little bit. Not because of the player, right? Because the player is fantastic, but because there's still over a year left in this process of his recruitment. And you never know what can happen.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'll say this. I say this over and over. When you have game-breaking speed, you can make an impact as a freshman at the wide receiver position. No doubt about it. I don't know where he'll slot in terms of the wide receiver room come next year. We don't know what's going to happen with the transfer portal. Obviously, with how the room is set up, obviously Moore is going to be gone, but everyone else is seemingly going to be back. We have the 2 5-stars that didn't play much this year that are going to hopefully play more come next year. So I don't know where he'll slot in, but there's going to be a role for this guy for sure.
Yeah, and to be clear, he won't be next year. He'll be the year after that.
Sorry.
2027. So
yeah, I keep forgetting.
When he gets to campus, Ryan Wingo will probably be off to the NFL after next year.
Right.
DeAndre Moore will definitely be gone at that point. I don't know. Maybe Emmett Mosley is a 3-year guy at Texas, but I'm not sure. It depends on what he looks like next year. You're going to have most of the core of this receiving room gone by that point. And so it's a question of what does Texas do in the portal after next season? What do they do in the portal this year? Are any of those guys that they bring in this year, are any of those guys 2-year players? Or are they kind of one and done types like Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden and Adonai Mitchell? And then ultimately, where in the development process are guys like Jamie French and Khalik Lockett and the guys that they brought in this past year's recruiting class that were freshmen this year, who we ultimately haven't seen enough of this year to really know anything quite yet. So, but get excited, but just keep in mind that it is over a year until this kid signs, unless he makes a last-minute decision to reclassify to 2026. So it's great to have him to start the class. Hopefully he can start recruiting other players in 2027. But if you don't think that Lane Kiffin hasn't already had a phone call with this kid as the number one player in the state of Louisiana for next year's recruiting class, less than 48 hours after taking the job at LSU, you're out of your mind. Everybody's going to be coming after this kid because he's just that good. It's not often that we or I or people in the industry compare recruits to Xavier Worthy, but there have been those comparisons. So
Yeah, and they're warranted for sure. But all right, we're about 51 minutes in here. We've got about
we don't
9.
we don't yes, we are 51 minutes in. We don't necessarily have to touch on each. We have a lot of time to talk about each guy in this recruiting class over the next couple of weeks. We don't have to touch on like the Jet Walkers of the world, the late running back commitment from Georgetown. We don't really have to touch on them individually as players and their skill sets. But what I kind of want to touch on is like the importance and the meaning of Texas flipping these 3-star developmental kind of prospects late and what that means from a recruiting standpoint. So, Emmy, I'll let you take it wherever you want to. You can touch on an individual player if you want, or a couple of them, or you can go big picture. But what do you think this means that Texas is going after some of these late senior evaluations here in the recruiting process, like a Jet Walker, who's a 3-star running back, like a Charlie Gillick, the 3-star tight end, like some of these other guys that they've gotten the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think this is how you fill out a football team, man. Like, for example, this linebacker they got, Rocky Cummings, he's listed at 6'4", 220, and he's a senior in high school. So by the time he goes through a summer in the Texas Strength and Conditioning program, he'll probably be 230 at the least. He'll probably be 235. So it's a it's a 3-star player, I believe. Yeah, 3-star player that has those type of tools. You take like, not even a gamble, but you choose the kind of body type you want, and you take the chance that you're going to develop the guy. So this is I think this is what good programs do. They get the guys they want, the type of personalities, type of players, type of guys that will fit into the locker room and can develop and have the work ethic. And then you go forward trying to develop those players. And I think any one of these 3 guys, Caden Scherr, Rocky Cummings, Jet Walker, they could end up being, starters down the road for sure. Look at Quintravian Wisner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Look at Trevor Gooseby even.
Yep. You're absolutely right. Here will be my like closing remarks on this recruiting segment. Right now, depending on where you look, you'll see this Texas class overall ranked outside of the top 5, kind of in the 7 to 10 range. And I think a lot of Texas fans are kind of, after what has been 4 consecutive top 5 classes, they are kind of like, what's going on here? We don't have a top 5 class. What the hell? Here's what I'll tell those people. The overall makeup of this class and the ones moving forward in high school are going to look a little bit different than the ones that Sark has largely built this program on from 2022 to 2025. In that time period culminated with the number 1 overall recruiting class last cycle, correct? So I think the approach is changing a little bit as college football and the landscape changes. And it's smart. Like, that's what you want to see from this staff. I think in the name of maximizing the optimal use of available revenue share dollars and NIL dollars that Texas gets, a few tweaks are being made to the high school recruiting plan. Here's what I know. Moving forward, Texas in high school football recruiting is going to get, they're going to target 6 to 8, maybe closer to 10 some years, but like 7, 8, 9 of the elite prospects.
6, 7.
There you go. They're going to get their guys at the most important positions. Like, for example, this year, it's an elite quarterback prospect in Diabell. It's an elite running back prospect in Derek Cooper. It's an elite offensive line prospect in oh God, what is his name? Why am I blanking on this?
Shoot, the kid out of Louisiana, yeah.
It'll come back to me. But you get the point. Like, it's an elite edge prospect in two elite edge prospects, I'd argue, in Jamarion, Carlton, and Richie Wesley. It's an elite corner prospect in Samari Matthews. It's an elite linebacker prospect in
Derek Cooper.
Atkinson.
No.
They're going to get like 6 to 8 of the elite guys. And then after that, like based on their needs, availability, and amount of money and what they cost, they're going to get their elite guys. They're going to get the elite guys they need. But beyond that, I think they're going to try to invest as little money in their recruiting classes as possible. Because I think the general rule of thumb at Texas is that they want to pay their starters money from revenue that is available. They want roster retention, right? They want to be able to retain the best players on their roster. And then they want to be able to go more heavy in the portal than maybe was allotted to them with the resources last year, because they had such a deep recruiting class last year, because they had all those 5 stars, and because they had the number 1 recruiting class in the country. That took away a little bit from the money that they were able to use and allocate in the portal. So I think they're just being a little bit smarter with their resources here. That's not to say they're not going to like try to find as many high-end prospects beyond the elite 5 stars and super blue chips that they bring in every year. But they're not going to overextend themselves for some run-of-the-mill 4-star or run-of-the-mill 3-star if it's not a guy that they can't reasonably bring in without overextending themselves financially. And that's just the bottom line. So you're going to get the elite prospects that you want. You're going to get the 6 to 8 super blue chips every single year. You're going to get your 5 stars. Don't worry about that, Texas fans. But I think moving forward, the classes just might not be as deep as you might like, because they're adjusting. They're becoming smarter, and they want to be able to allocate their resources elsewhere as well. So that's kind of where we stand recruiting wise.
Yeah, and if they clearly obviously do their due diligence, and they have a type of guy that they're looking for too. It's not just just plucking some random 3-star. Like they're still going through their process. So that, at least for Texas fans, you can at least have solace in the fact that these are guys that they clearly believe in and developing into starters. So
here's the last thing on that. Here's the example of that. If you want me to quantify what I just said. Last year, when they had the number 1 ranked recruiting class in the country, they had 15 players committed, or 15 players in last year's class were ranked inside the top 175 players in the country. Meaning that they had, let me do the quick math on this with my calculator, 15 over 175. They had 8% of the top 175 players in the country. You know how many high school football players there are in America? That's ridiculous. This year, they only have 10 of the top 175. Still pretty good, still pretty damn good, but not quite 15. That's what I'm saying. They're not gonna overextend themselves for a couple extra 4-stars just to make the class ranking be in the top 5. It's just not what they're gonna do. So, 8 players in this class are ranked outside the national top 600 in the Rivals industry rankings. And 4 of those 8 committed to the Longhorns in the last couple weeks. We're talking about the Rocky Cummings of the world. We're talking about the offensive lineman that they just flipped from Stanford, Caden Scher. We're talking about those guys. It's nothing against those guys. It's not saying that those guys can't become solid players. That's actually the reason Texas is taking them, because they think with a couple years of development that they can be winning football players at the college level, that they can develop them into something. But they're not having to overextend themselves financially for guys like that. And it's going to save them money for maybe some more important portal pickups that can contribute next year to potentially winning a national championship. And that's where we stand.
Yeah, and based on what I've seen too, Caden Scher is underrated, 100% underrated. I think he puts on the way he needs to. That's a player right there, 100%.
All right, we don't have time to touch on coaching search. We'll do that maybe next week, or the coaching hires. But one shout out. It can be college football related. Try to make it college football related. It can be recruiting related, or it can be college basketball related. One shout out you want to give, whatever it might be this week that would be our parting shot.
Well, this one's kind of more, I guess, Texas NFL draft related, I guess. Texas NFL players related, I guess.
Okay.
I wanted to shout out Adonai Mitchell. We mentioned him earlier. He had a breakout game this week. 8 catches, 100 and something yards. I think he had a touchdown, I want to say. Big game from him. Jets got to win. Hopefully he can find his footing with the Jets, because they certainly need him to. And it's looking like he's turning a corner.
I like it. My shout out is going to go to a player in this year's recruiting class, Jermaine Bishop Jr. We've reached a point in the evolution of this kid, Jermaine Bishop Jr., the 5-star athlete in the state of Texas from 24/7. They rank him as a 5-star. This evolution of this player is absolutely fascinating. If you were focused on other things, and rightfully so, hard to blame you on that. This weekend in the high school football playoffs, Jermaine Bishop burst into a ball of flames and a 38-32 third-round playoff win over Forney on Saturday night. He totaled 389 yards of total offense, including 15 catches for 328 yards and 3 touchdowns, to go along with a rushing touchdown and a game-stealing interception on defense as time expired. And that's not all he did in the game. He's really emerged as one of the most curious prospects in this entire 2026 recruiting class, because I ultimately don't know when he gets on the campus in January where they're going to start him out in spring ball. Like, is he going to be part of the receiver room? Is he going to be part of the defensive back room? That's why he has the athlete designation, on his recruiting profile, is because he doesn't really have like a position. He just plays every position.
Yeah.
But he's a damn good football player. He's a football playing son of a gun. I don't know if he has really a peer that you can compare him to in this recruiting class. But he's right now, it's hard to see him contributing super early just because he's probably like 155, 160 pounds. He's slight right now from a frame perspective. But he is, if you watch him and you watch his high school tape, he's a 5-star football player in a 4-stars body. That's what Jermaine Bishop is at this point. So if he can get stronger and he can kind of work on his body this offseason and get up to like 175, 180, then we could really be talking about a potential monster here in Jermaine Bishop, whether he plays corner or he plays wide receiver or wherever Texas wants to use him. But that's my shout out for this week.
Yeah. That reminds me that my dad had a suggestion for our channel, like in the future, like possibly could we transition into deep in the heart of Longhorn sports being deep in the heart of Texas football sports, I guess, where we could just cover Texas high school football, Texas high school recruiting, and obviously the Texas Longhorns, and then obviously maybe not the 3 Texas NFL teams, but because that would probably be too much, but particularly Texas high school football and
Yeah,
Texas Longhorn
absolutely.
football. That could be something we do in the future. But if you want to see something like that, leave a comment down below, or and we'll maybe make that happen. But
I've
yeah,
got I've got a lot more that I could say, but we're over the hour mark, and I know Emmy has somewhere to be, so we will touch on it on our next episode. We'll get probably into some of the coaching hires. I don't know if we'll touch on conference championships. We might. We'll see. Um, we'll talk more about this recruiting class, and we might get into some basketball as well. So,
right.
Emmy and I are actually going to be at the Texas Virginia game, part of the ACC SEC challenge coming up this Wednesday. So check that game out if you're interested.
Yeah, you might see us on the sidelines, possibly.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. All right. Well, that's going to do it for my co-host, Emmy Nixon, and for myself, Michael Wein. This has been Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Make sure, if I didn't already mention it, that's my bad. Make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. If you're already subscribed, great. We greatly appreciate that. It doesn't sign you up for anything. It doesn't cost you anything. We don't send you a newsletter. We don't fill up your inbox with junk. It just helps the algorithm. So if you like what we do here, or even if you're not really that interested in Texas football, but you just like us as people, and you like hearing us talk and hear our opinions on stuff, like and subscribe. We greatly appreciate that. But we'll be back sometime this week with another episode. That'll likely be an NFL episode. And then the train will just keep moving as we move closer to Christmas and the college football playoff.
And
I
then
think I think what Texas not being in the playoff will allow us to do is to talk more in depth about some of the teams that we haven't really been focused on over the course of this regular season. We'll be talking about the playoff even if Texas isn't in it. But keep your horns up, and we'll see you next time. Peace out. Hook 'em.